The unsolvable cases haunting investigators today. What happens when two teenage girls vanish on their way home from a convenience store, and the police file on their case just disappears along with them? What happens when a young mother is murdered and her body is set on fire, destroying almost every clue that could lead to her killer? For investigators, these aren't just questions. They're the entrance to a labyrinth with no exit. The world of law enforcement is full of stories about incredible detective work and brilliant forensic breakthroughs that bring criminals to justice. But this isn't a story about those cases. This is about the other side of the coin. The cases that go cold and fester in the minds of detectives and families for years, sometimes decades, without a single answer. Today, we're exploring the chilling cold cases that keep detectives awake at night. These are the baffling disappearances and murders where every single lead turns into a dead end, leaving families trapped in a nightmare of not knowing, desperate for answers that may never come. From vanishing twins to victims of unimaginable brutality, we're going to delve into the frustrating, perplexing, and deeply human stories of the cases that refuse to be solved, haunting investigators to this day. Section 1. The Vanishing Twins, Danette and Jeanette Millbrook. On March 18, 1990, in Augusta, Georgia, 15-year-old fraternal twins Danette and Jeanette Millbrook were having a pretty typical Sunday. They went to church, had lunch at a local church's chicken, and were just getting ready for the week. By all accounts, they were good kids. They weren't known for causing trouble, and they were part of a close-knit family. The twins were inseparable, best friends who did everything together. But that afternoon, their day took a turn that would plunge their family into a 3-decade-long nightmare. The girls needed bus money for school, so they walked to their godfather's house, who gave them $20, enough for the bus and some snacks. From there, they stopped by a few more relatives' houses. Their family would later say that the girls seemed scared to walk alone that day. Earlier, they had told their mother that a van seemed to be following them, and it left them feeling really unsettled. Their last known stop was a pump-and-shop convenience store. The clerk knew the twins and remembered them buying chips, candy, and soda. She said nothing seemed wrong. The girls left the store to continue their walk home. And then, they were gone. Just like that. They were never seen again. When Danette and Jeanette didn't come home that night, their mother, Louise, was hit with a wave of dread. She tried to report them missing to the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, but her panic was brushed aside. She was allegedly told they were probably just runaways and that she had to wait 24 hours to file a report. For a family who knew these girls, this was devastating. They were not runaways. This single decision would set the tone for an investigation that was, to put it mildly, a catastrophic failure. Those critical first hours of the search were lost forever. When police finally did start looking, the effort was riddled with mistakes. The twins' last name was misspelled in the official record, and Jeanette's middle name was written down wrong, creating bureaucratic headaches that would sabotage any future search efforts. The family felt that law enforcement just wasn't taking the disappearance of two black teenagers seriously. Their case simply wasn't a priority. Then, the unthinkable happened. About a year after the girls disappeared, the case was officially closed. According to the family, an officer told them that since the twins had turned 17, they were considered adults under Georgia's runaway laws. Even if they were found, they couldn't be forced to come home. The message was loud and clear. The search was over. The girls were even removed from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children Registry. For 22 years, the Millbrook family was left in an agonizing limbo. No active investigation, no new leads, and no hope from the people who were supposed to be helping them. Their mother and sister, Shanta, refused to give up, fighting to keep the twins' memory alive. Their persistence finally paid off in 2013 when a newly elected sheriff, Richard Roundtree, agreed to look into the case. But when Sheriff Roundtree went to pull the file, he made a shocking discovery. There wasn't one. While some partial notes may have existed in other records, the central case file itself, the folder with all the original reports, notes, and evidence, was gone. It had vanished, just like the girls. The case was reopened, but investigators were starting from scratch, more than 20 years late. Memories had faded, witnesses were gone, and any physical evidence was long lost. Several theories have emerged. The family is still haunted by the story of the van that was supposedly following the girls. Was it a random predator? Or someone they knew? Some suspicion has even fallen on their estranged father, John Millbrook, who allegedly had a history of violence and seemed uninterested in the search for his daughters. Today, more than 3 decades later, the case remains unsolved. Their sister Shanta continues to be a powerful voice for them, working to keep their story in the public eye. The disappearance of the Millbrook twins is a tragedy on so many levels. It's the story of 2 young girls who vanished into thin air, but it's also a story of a system that failed them from the very beginning. Section 2. The Puzzle with Missing Pieces, Terry Howell. In the summer of 1980, in Daviess County, Kentucky, the life of a 24-year-old mother named Terry Marie Howell came to a horrific and mysterious end. Her case is a chilling lesson in how a crime scene can be so compromised that it leaves investigators with a puzzle where all the essential pieces are missing. On the night of July 24th, Terry went out with a friend to a local bar. Around 1 in the morning, she and her friend accepted a ride from a man they didn't know. He was described as white, with brown hair, about 5 feet 10 inches, with a slender build, driving what looked like a light blue, 1960s model Ford. Shortly after they got in the car, the night took a terrifying turn. Terry's friend realized the man wasn't driving them home. He was going in the opposite direction. In a panic, the friend jumped from the moving car and managed to escape. But Terry was still in the car. It was the last time she was seen alive. Hours later, that same afternoon, a volunteer firefighter spotted smoke coming from an abandoned farmhouse on a rural road. When emergency crews put out the fire, they made a grim discovery inside. They found a body. The fire had been set on purpose, a brutal and obvious attempt to destroy evidence. The investigation was immediately hobbled. The fire had consumed almost everything, and crime scene processing in 1980 wasn't what it is today. To make things worse, crucial evidence was either never collected or was lost in the chaos. In a baffling oversight, very few, if any, photos were taken of the crime scene, leaving future investigators with no visual record. An autopsy revealed that Terry had been strangled to death before the fire was set. Her mother, Ava, had already filed a missing persons report. Using dental records and a blouse found near the farmhouse, authorities were able to identify the victim as Terry Howell. The investigation started, but leads were few and far between. The only real information came from Terry's friend who escaped. She provided the description of the driver, which led to a composite sketch. But despite the sketch, no one came forward with a name. The case quickly went cold. For years, there was just silence. Terry's mother became her daughter's biggest advocate, relentlessly pushing for answers. Decades passed. Forensic science evolved, and DNA testing offered a glimmer of hope. But the biggest challenge in Terry's case was always the lack of evidence to test. Then, in April 2024, after more than 4 decades of mystery, the Kentucky State Police made a stunning announcement. Using forensic genealogy, they had finally identified the unknown man whose DNA was found at the scene, William Dennis Matthews. It was a monumental breakthrough, but it wasn't the final answer. Matthews had died years earlier, and while his DNA placed him at the scene, investigators still don't have enough evidence to say for sure what his role was, or if he acted alone. Tragically, Terry's mother, Ava, passed away in 2021. She never got to see this breakthrough or to know for certain who took her daughter's life. While modern technology has recovered one long-lost puzzle piece, the full picture of what happened on that terrifying July night remains tragically incomplete. The cases of the Millbrook twins and Terry Howell are just two examples of the mysteries that leave families and communities searching for answers for decades. The silence surrounding these cases is often the biggest barrier to justice. That's where you come in. If you've heard anything about these cases, or if you have a theory you think investigators might have missed, please share it respectfully in the comments below. You never know what small detail could spark a new conversation. And if you find these stories as compelling as we do, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. We are dedicated to exploring these unsolved mysteries, not just as case files, but as the human stories they represent. Section 3. The Locked Room, Rex Harper. In homicide investigations, some crime scenes tell a clear story. Signs of a break-in, a struggle, a robbery gone wrong. But what happens when a man is violently murdered, and the scene tells no story at all? That's the baffling reality that has surrounded the murder of Rex Harper for over 3 decades, a case that has become one of Oklahoma's most perplexing mysteries. Rex Harper was a 31-year-old newlywed living in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, in early 1998. He was a businessman in the trucking industry and, by all accounts, living a normal life. On January 14, 1998, that life came to a violent end. Rex was found shot to death, not in some dark alley, but right at the wheel of his dump truck, parked at a local mall. What investigators didn't find is what has made this case so strange. There was no sign of a struggle, no obvious signs of robbery. The murder had all the marks of a professional hit, a clean, swift killing with no witnesses and no mess. So, who would want Rex Harper dead? And why? Investigators looked into his business dealings. The trucking industry can be cutthroat, and it was possible a dispute had turned deadly. But every lead went cold. Another theory was more personal and centered on a love triangle. It was alleged that a 2-time world champion steer wrestler named Claude Stanley Williamson had hired a man named Willie "Bubby" Hayes to kill Rex. The supposed motive? Williamson was obsessed with a former girlfriend who had recently married Rex. This provided a powerful, personal reason for the crime. Both Williamson and Hayes were charged, and it looked like the case was about to be solved. But charging someone and convicting them are two very different things. Despite the arrests and the compelling motive, the case against the two men fell apart. There just wasn't enough evidence to prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The charges were dropped, and the investigation was right back at square one. The case went cold, but it never really went away. It felt like a cowboy code of silence, as some have called it, had settled over the case. Potential witnesses either knew nothing or weren't willing to talk. Without a confession, a murder weapon, or a witness, investigators were stuck. The passage of time has only made the mystery deeper. The killer, or killers, were ruthlessly efficient. They left behind no fingerprints, no DNA, no loose ends. It's a chilling example of how someone can commit a targeted, execution-style murder and simply walk away, vanishing into thin air. For Rex Harper's family, the years have brought no closure, only the painful knowledge that the person responsible has never been held accountable. Section 4. The Brutal Unraveling, Karina Saunders. Some cases are haunting because there are no clues. Others are haunting because the clues you do have point to a world of such extreme violence, it's almost impossible to comprehend. The murder of 19-year-old Karina Saunders in 2011 is definitely one of those cases. It's a case defined by its sheer brutality and its terrifying, though unconfirmed, links to the dark underworld of human trafficking. Karina Saunders was, by many accounts, a bright and bubbly young woman who had graduated high school early. But in the year before her death, she had begun to struggle with drug addiction. In the weeks before she disappeared, she seemed to be turning her life around, even checking into a rehab program. On October 8, 2011, she was captured on surveillance footage getting into a red pickup truck with several men inside. Her mother reported her missing 2 days later. On October 13th, that hope turned to horror. Behind a grocery store in Bethany, Oklahoma, 2 bags were found, a small laundry bag and a Nike duffel bag. Inside were the dismembered remains of Karina Saunders. The brutality of the crime shocked even seasoned investigators. The condition of her remains suggested she had been horribly tortured before her death. Fear gripped the community, and terrifying rumors began to spread, the most persistent being that Karina's murder had been filmed as a warning to others who might cross a local drug ring. The investigation was a frustrating journey into a secretive and dangerous world. Leads pointed to people involved in the city's drug trade, and several people were arrested over the next couple of years. Each time an arrest was made, it seemed like justice was finally within reach. But each time, the case fell apart, often because key testimony came from unreliable sources, making it impossible to prove in court. And despite extensive efforts, the rumored video of her murder has never been found. The building where investigators believe Karina was killed was eventually demolished, taking any secrets it might have held with it. To this day, no one has been convicted of Karina Saunders' murder. Her case highlights the immense challenges of prosecuting crimes linked to organized criminal networks, where witnesses are too terrified to talk and criminals are experts at covering their tracks. Karina is remembered by her loved ones as more than just the girl found in a duffel bag. She was a daughter, a friend, a young woman whose future was stolen in the most horrific way imaginable. Her case remains a chilling open wound in Oklahoma, a reminder of a crime so monstrous that it remains unsolved. So, what do we do with stories like these? The stories of the Millbrook twins, Terry Howell, Rex Harper, and Karina Saunders are more than just mysteries. They're profound human tragedies, stories of lives cut short and families left to navigate a world without answers. These cases represent the absolute limit of investigative work, where every lead dries up and every theory hits a brick wall. It's easy to think that with today's technology, no crime can stay unsolved forever. And it's true, forensic genealogy and advanced DNA testing have worked miracles, bringing closure to families and putting killers behind bars decades later. But technology isn't magic. It needs something to work with. It needs a usable DNA sample from the crime scene, evidence that hasn't been burned, degraded, or simply lost. In the cases we've talked about today, those fundamental elements are missing. The Millbrook twins case file vanished. The fire destroyed Terry Howell's crime scene. Rex Harper's killer was surgically clean, and Karina Saunders' murder is shielded by a wall of fear. These are the cases that show the frustrating reality that sometimes, despite the best efforts and the most advanced science, the truth stays just out of reach. But the absence of a resolution doesn't erase the victims. Behind every cold case file is a person whose story deserves to be told. Danette and Jeanette were sisters with their whole lives ahead of them. Terry was a young mother. Rex was a newlywed. Karina was a daughter trying to find her way. Their cases may be unsolved, but their lives mattered. And as long as their stories are told, there is always a flicker of hope that someone, somewhere, will come forward with the one piece of information that could finally bring these haunting investigations to an end. What do you think is the biggest barrier to solving cases like these after so much time has passed? Let us know. And let us never forget the names of those who are still waiting for justice.